Welcome everyone to build 45. This is just going to be a quick rebuild and upgrade into the Inwin D-Frame 2.0. And this is actually my first build into this case. This is how the system looked when it arrived from the customer, and I'm just about to start stripping it down. Then the first thing I'll do is test all of the components because most of them are second-hand. And then I'll begin on the custom paint job and the case mods. And I'm quite looking forward to painting this case. I'm not actually going to show the process because it's something that I've shown many times. But the frame, it was a little bit difficult to paint because of all of the, acute angles getting into the corners and just, getting at the frame from so many different angles, and the fact that it's in two different halves, which kind of makes it hard to hang. It's very different to just spraying a flat panel, which is, a lot easier to just get coverage and a nice finish. So the color scheme of this build is violet and blue. So it's a violet metallic with a high gloss finish, a high gloss clear coat. And the blue is DNA Silver Flare Silver Metallic with blue candy, sapphire blue, with a matte clear coat. So this was actually the first build that I used resonance in. This build was quite some time ago now. And it's an interesting layout to this case because the I/O faces the top. It's non-standard, but it turns out that resonance worked quite well for this, even though the layout was more specifically designed for mid towers with a radiator at the front and at the top with a standard orientation. Because you can see that it ended up very direct routing. We managed to just do very short tubes to each of the radiators and direct runs to each radiator as well. And this was all possible because of the adjustment on resonance, the vertical adjustment. And then the run to the CPU from the outlet on resonance is also very short. And the one from the CPU to the GPU you can hardly see, and then it goes back from the GPU to one of the inlets on resonance. So a very short and direct and clean loop. It worked out quite well, and this is what we were kind of after with the design of this build, was to have resonance kind of mirrored by the beautiful big bits power GPU water block. So you may have noticed there was already a little bit of fluid in the lower radiator, and that's because we flushed this loop. We already flushed the components and cleaned them all out separately, but I also wanted to run Mayhem's Blitz through this loop, all of the components, or most of them being secondhand, before I filled it. So there's probably a couple of 100 mils of distilled water down there. And when you do that, you need to consider your coolant concentration. So what you need to do is, when the loop is completely empty, you fill the loop with distilled water and you measure exactly how much goes in, and then you drain the loop and you measure exactly how much comes out, and then you know how much is left, and you need to adjust your coolant concentration for that. Because I've never had a loop that drains 100%. Most of them drain around 80% if you're lucky, and sometimes a lot less. Even if the drain is at the lowest point, there's still airlocks that prevent all of the fluid coming out. So you can see what it was like to fill resonance. It took about 5 times of switching the pump on and off for this build before the coolant was fully circulating. that's the thing about any distro. The fluid volume is going to be significantly less, generally speaking, than a tube reservoir. I mean, unless you design a distro to be huge, big, and bulky, you're really never going to get up to the fluid volume of, let's say, a 200 or a 250 millimeter tube reservoir. And when we were designing, each of our products which have manifolds, so Spectre first of all, Resonance and Wraith, we had to consider, the sacrifice that would need to be made for the sake of aesthetics and functionality. So instead of making the product huge, bulky, and also ugly, and not having balanced aesthetics for the sake of easy filling, well, from our experience, like, filling is only something you're going to have to do once, maybe a couple of times, and then you just forget about it, and it runs for years. And so, we would rather have something that is nice to look at instead of easy to fill, because what is required to make a distro super easy to fill like a tube reservoir is extremely high fluid volume and really opening up the the internals of the distro. It's really not something that is possible without destroying the aesthetics. And particularly for Resonance, where we wanted it to fit into tight spaces, be compatible, adjustable, and so many other things that came into it, this was a small sacrifice that had to be made. So this is about 30-40 minutes after filling, and you can see that all of the air is out of the loop except for the sticky micro bubbles, which with most loops they're in there for a couple of days, usually stuck to the sides of the tube reservoir and the water blocks. Completely depends on the loop, though. Sometimes they come out a bit quicker. I definitely enjoyed the experience of building into this case. I always enjoy building into the high-end Inwin cases. They're just super creative and unique. I mean, this case is expensive at $1,200 USD, and it looks like there's not a lot here, but keep in mind it also comes with tempered glass side panel windows, which I wasn't shipped for obvious reasons. But it really lays the groundwork and inspiration for anything, and it's a case that I would like to have the opportunity to work with again and to do a lot of mods with, because I have a lot in mind that I would love to do with this case. And you can certainly see the value is here. I mean, it comes with the PSU. The frame is, all individually welded, which is super difficult to manufacture and to consistently reproduce. So, it is a great case and really easy to build into because of the open design. It's something that always helps. Being able to get your hands in from all sides with a high-end liquid-cooled system, it just makes it super easy. So, the cases that I find are the most difficult to build into are the smaller, more compact mid-towers. Like when I'm installing dual GPUs, a lot of high-end components, dual loops, if you put in one component at the wrong time, you pretty much have to strip the build down just because of one little cable or something. You just can't get your hands in. And so it was really a breeze to build into this case. The cable management layout, despite there being almost nothing there for cable management, is pretty good thanks to there being a lot of holes in the motherboard tray, and they're fairly well placed. Although I do think there are too many cable routing holes, and many of them are bigger than they need to be, but it certainly made things easy, and we hardly had to do anything for the cable management. We just let the cables fall towards the bottom where they need to go anyway to get to the PSU.